Welcome to Chapter 15, Augmented Feedback. Let me set this up with a memory I think every one of you can recall. Think back to the first few times you tried some new physical skill. A golf swing, parallel parking, a dance step, throwing a dart. How did it go? Probably not well. And more to the point, you had questions. What am I doing wrong? What should I change next time? You could answer some of those yourself just by trying again, but when an instructor stepped in and told you, it saved you enormous time and energy. That moment, the instructor adding information to you, is the entire subject of this chapter. We call that added information augmented feedback. The word augmented simply means added to or enhanced to. It's the feedback that comes from outside you. A coach, a therapist, a stopwatch, a video, a buzzer, on top of the feedback your own body already gives you. Here's the concept that frames everything today. Augmented feedback provides information that can facilitate skill learning. Notice the word can, because the surprising truth of this chapter is that augmented feedback is not automatically helpful. Given the wrong way, at the wrong time, or too often, it can do nothing, or actually make learning worse. So our job today is to turn giving feedback, which feels like the most natural thing a teacher does, into a deliberate, skilled act. What information, in what form, at what moment, how often? Those 4 decisions are the chapter.
Here's the roadmap in 3 parts. Part 1 introduces the feedback family. What feedback even is, the 2 kinds you can add as a teacher, the 2 jobs feedback does, and then a genuinely surprising question. Does the learner even need your feedback at all? You'll see the answer is not a simple yes. It's actually 4 different answers, depending on the skill and the person. Part 2 gets into the content and the form. Should you tell people about their errors or about what they did right? Numbers or words? A clever idea called the performance bandwidth. The trap of giving wrong information, and the many ways to deliver feedback beyond just talking. Video, kinematics, biofeedback. And part 3 is about timing and frequency, whether to give feedback during the movement or after, what happens in the small gaps of time between attempts, and the counterintuitive headline that giving feedback less often usually produces better learning. By the end, you'll distinguish your 2 kinds of feedback, know the 4 ways feedback can matter or backfire, compare its forms, and understand why the most effective teachers deliberately hold back. Keep one practical question running the whole time. I'm about to give this learner some information. Is it the right information, in the right form, at the right moment? And am I giving it too often? Let's begin with what feedback actually is.
Part 1, the feedback family. Before we can decide how to give feedback well, we need to be precise about what it is. And there's a clean way to picture it as a family with 2 branches. The whole first section is built to answer a sequence of questions. First, what are the 2 big types of performance information a learner can have? The kind that comes free from their own body, and the kind you add from outside. Second, when you do add information, what 2 flavors it comes in? Information about the result, or information about the movement? Third, what is that added information actually for? What jobs does it do in the learning process? And fourth, the question that overturns most people's assumptions. Is your feedback even necessary? We tend to assume more feedback is always better, that a good teacher is constantly talking. Part 1 is going to complicate that comfortably held belief and replace it with something more disciplined. The thread tying it together is this. Augmented feedback is a tool you add on top of a learner who already has a great deal of information of their own. So the real skill is knowing when your addition genuinely helps. Let's start by drawing the family tree.
Let's start with the family tree of feedback, because the single most important distinction in this chapter lives right here. When someone performs a skill, 2 general types of performance information are available to them. The first is task-intrinsic feedback. That's the sensory perceptual information that's a natural, built-in part of doing the skill. Your own senses provide it for free. Throw a dart, you see the dart fly and land, you feel the throw in your arm and hand, you hear it hit the board. Touch, proprioception, vision, hearing, all giving you information without anyone saying a word. The second type is augmented feedback. And augmented means added to.
This is information from a source outside the performer that adds to or enhances that task intrinsic feedback. A coach, a stopwatch, a video, a buzzer. Now here's the relationship and why I call it a family. Augmented feedback doesn't replace your senses, it supplements them. Sometimes it enhances something your senses could detect, but not reliably, like a coach telling a golfer exactly where their hands were at the top of the swing. And sometimes it supplies what your senses genuinely cannot get, telling a golfer where the ball landed when they kept their head down, or telling a patient with vestibular problems how much their body swayed. Hold on to this branching picture. Your learner already has a whole sensory world of feedback. Your job is to add to it wisely.
Now, when you do add feedback, it comes in two flavors, and you need to be able to tell them apart instantly because the rest of the chapter keeps using these two terms. The first is knowledge of results, KR. KR is information about the outcome of the attempt, the result. Your arrow landed in the blue at 9 o'clock. You walked 10 feet farther than yesterday. The serve was long. A buzzer that sounds when you hit the target range of motion. It's all about what happened, the result. The second is knowledge of performance, KP. KP is information about the movement that produced that outcome. You didn't take your backswing far enough before starting down. You should bend your knees more as you walk. A video replay of your swing. A stick figure showing your joint motion. The difference is the aspect of performance the information points to. KR points at the result, KP points at the movement that caused it. Take the archery example. The shot was in the blue is KR. You pulled the bow to the left as you released is KP. Same shot, two completely different kinds of information. And one quick caution. When a basketball player simply sees their own shot go in, that's not KR. That's their own vision, task intrinsic feedback. KR is specifically the added external version. Keep KR and KP straight. We'll be weighing them against each other for the rest of the hour.
So we add KR or KP. But what is that added information actually for? It plays two distinct roles, and good teachers use both on purpose. The first role is to inform, to help the learner achieve the action goal. Because feedback tells you something about how the attempt is going or went, you can judge whether what you're doing is right and adjust, reaching the goal faster and more easily than you would fumbling on your own. That's the role we'll spend most of the chapter on. But there's a second role that's easy to underrate. Feedback motivates. The learner uses it to compare their performance against a goal, and then decides, keep going, change the goal, or quit. A simple, you're doing a lot better, can raise someone's sense of their own ability, and a stronger sense of ability predicts longer persistence and higher expectations. There's a lovely example from rehabilitation. Patients with neurological gait disorders training on a robotic gait device reported being more motivated to train when visual feedback about their performance was added. So when you give feedback, you're never only handing over information. You're also shaping whether the person wants to keep trying. The same sentence can both correct and encourage, and a skilled practitioner is aware of which job each piece of feedback is doing.
And now the question that surprises almost everyone. Is your feedback even necessary for learning? Our gut says obviously yes. How could anyone learn without being told how they're doing? But the honest research answer isn't a simple yes or no. It's 4 different answers, and which one applies depends on characteristics of the skill and of the learner. Answer 1. Augmented feedback can be essential. There are situations where without it, learning simply can't happen. Answer 2. It may not be needed at all. For some skills, it's redundant because the learner's own senses already tell them everything they need. Answer 3. It can enhance. The skill is learnable without it, but feedback makes learning faster or pushes performance higher than it would otherwise go. And answer 4, the one nobody expects, it can hinder, actually making learning worse than no feedback at all. So picture a 2x2, essential, redundant, enhancing, harmful. The art of this chapter is diagnosing which quadrant you're in before you open your mouth, because the same well-intentioned feedback that's essential in one situation is useless in another and harmful in the third. Let's look at the 2 ends of that spectrum, when it's essential and when it backfires.
Let's take the essential end first. When is augmented feedback truly necessary? Not just nice, but required for learning to happen. It comes down to situations where the learner can't use their own task intrinsic feedback, and there are 3 of them. First, the performance context doesn't make the critical sensory information available. Imagine trying to learn to hit a target you can't actually see. The information you need just isn't there from the environment, so feedback has to supply it. Second, injury or disease has knocked out the sensory pathway the learner would normally use. The information is theoretically available, but this person's body can't detect it, so feedback fills the gap. Third, and this one's subtle, the senses work fine and the information is available, but the learner can't yet interpret it. A beginner asked to throw at a certain speed or extend the knee a certain distance simply has no experience translating what they feel into "that was too fast" or "not far enough." Here, feedback makes their own sensory information meaningful. Notice the common thread. In every case, augmented feedback is essential precisely because the loop between the learner's senses and the goal is broken, missing, damaged, or not yet readable. When you spot one of those three, your feedback isn't optional. It's the bridge.
Now the opposite, unsettling end. Feedback can actually hinder learning. How could giving someone helpful information make them worse? Through dependence. Here's the pattern. A learner gets feedback on every attempt, and during practice, they look great, but they've quietly started leaning on that feedback like a crutch, using it instead of learning to read their own senses. Then comes the test, the game, the real world, where you and your feedback aren't there, and performance falls apart. Sometimes it drops to where it would have been if you'd never given feedback at all. The practice gains were borrowed, not owned. And here's the key condition. This dependence is most likely exactly when task intrinsic feedback is minimal or hard to detect or interpret, because that's when the learner is most tempted to substitute your easy, reliable feedback for the hard work of reading their own body. There are three classic ways to create this dependence, and we'll meet all three later in the chapter: giving wrong feedback, giving feedback during the movement, and giving feedback too often. For now, just hold the warning. Your goal is not to become indispensable. It's the opposite, to give information in a way that the learner eventually doesn't need you at all.
Let me recap part 1, because it reframes the whole job of giving feedback. There are two types of performance information: task intrinsic feedback, which comes free from the learner's own senses, and augmented feedback, which you add from an external source to enhance it. Augmented feedback comes in two kinds: knowledge of results, about the outcome, and knowledge of performance, about the movement that produced it. It does two jobs. It informs, guiding the learner to the goal, and it motivates, keeping them striving. And critically, it is not always helpful. Its effect is one of four: essential when the learner can't use their own senses, redundant when they can, enhancing when it speeds things up, or harmful when it breeds dependence. So before you give feedback, diagnose which situation you're in. Now that we know what feedback is and whether to add any, part 2 asks the next question. When you do give it, what should be in it, and what form should it take?